Dr. Amanda Brooks rubbed her tired eyes, staring at the anomalous readings on her monitor for the 12th time that night. The Deep Space Monitoring Station had been picking up irregular patterns from the Kuiper Belt for weeks, but tonight was different. The distortions weren't random. They moved with purpose. "Hey Ryan, can you verify these coordinates?" She called out to her colleague, Dr. Ryan Mitchell, who was dozing in his chair. "I think we got something serious here." Ryan shuffled over, his coffee mug firmly gripped in his hand. His eyes widened as he processed the data streams. "These can't be natural formations," he muttered, setting down his coffee. "The movement patterns suggest artificial propulsion, but they're not showing up on any conventional tracking systems." Amanda pulled up a three-dimensional projection of the anomaly's trajectories. Over the past month, they had been systematically moving through the solar system, following a grid-like pattern that screamed of methodical exploration. "Look at this," she pointed to a cluster of distortions. "They're maintaining equidistant positions, like a search formation." Commander James Marshall arrived at the facility within 2 hours of receiving their urgent call. His weathered face grew increasingly grave as Amanda and Ryan presented their findings. 20 years in military intelligence had taught him to trust his instincts, and everything about this situation set off warning bells. "So, you're telling me we have invisible objects, presumably ships, conducting what appears to be a systematic survey of our solar system?" Marshall's voice was calm, but his fingers drummed restlessly on the conference table. "Yes, sir." Amanda projected a time-lapse of the past month's movements. "They're using some form of cloaking technology we can only detect because of the gravitational micro-distortions they create. We wouldn't have noticed if we hadn't just upgraded our quantum interference detectors last month." Marshall's face darkened. "And they're getting closer to Earth." "On a calculated trajectory," Ryan added, pulling up another diagram. "Based on their current pattern, they'll be in high Earth orbit within 2 weeks. The commander stood up, pacing the room. "This isn't a scientific expedition," he stated firmly. "This is a military reconnaissance operation. I've seen these search patterns before. They're mapping our defensive capabilities, or lack thereof." "Sir, with all due respect," Amanda interjected, "we can't jump to conclusions. First contact with an alien civilization is too important to." "Dr. Brooks," Marshall cut her off gently, "in all of human history, has any advanced civilization's first contact with a less developed one ever been purely scientific?" He let the question hang in the air. The silence that followed was deafening. Within hours, Marshall was presenting their findings to an emergency session of the UN Security Council. The reception was exactly what he'd expected: skepticism, dismissal, and accusations of fear-mongering. "Commander Marshall," the French representative spoke with barely concealed condescension, "you're asking us to believe that invisible alien ships are conducting military reconnaissance of Earth based on some gravitational anomalies that only one facility has detected." "3 facilities now," Marshall corrected, his voice steady. "Observatories in Chile and Australia have confirmed the readings. And yes, that's exactly what I'm asking you to believe, because that's what the evidence shows." The Chinese representative leaned forward. "And what would you have us do? Panic the public over unconfirmed readings?" "I would have us prepare," Marshall replied, bringing up Amanda's data. "These objects, whatever they are, will reach Earth orbit in 13 days. I'm not suggesting we panic. I'm suggesting we get ready for the possibility that humanity is not alone, and our visitors might not be friendly." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, only a minimal preparedness protocol was authorized. Marshall left the UN building feeling the weight of impending disaster on his shoulders. Back at the monitoring station, Amanda and Ryan continued tracking the anomalies. As they watched, one of the objects broke formation, executing a series of maneuvers that defied known physics. "They're testing our tracking capabilities," Amanda whispered, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. "They want to know if we can see them." In the coming days, humanity would learn just how right Commander Marshall's instincts had been. The Kraxan Empire had indeed found Earth, and they had already decided its fate. The only question was whether humanity would go quietly into subjugation, or show the galaxy something it had never seen before. The Kraxan Empire's first contact protocol was nothing like the movies. There were no hovering ships over major cities, no diplomatic overtures, and no mysterious symbols to decode. Instead, they hijacked every broadcasting signal during the Super Bowl halftime show. Their message as cold as it was clear. People of Earth, you are now property of the Kraxan Empire. Surrender your autonomy within one solar rotation, or face immediate pacification. Colonel Rebecca Hayes watched the broadcast from the Pentagon's Crisis Command Center, her expression hardening, as the alien message repeated in multiple languages. Around her, military leaders from global powers sat in stunned silence. Well, she finally broke the silence. At least they're direct. General Thompson, her superior, leaned forward. They're expecting us to roll over. Standard tactics for an advanced civilization. Shock and awe, followed by quick submission. Lieutenant Michael Cooper burst into the room, clutching a tablet. Sir, ma'am, you need to see this. His face was flushed with excitement. Our nuclear detection satellites just picked up something incredible. The Kraxan ships, their shields flicker when they pass through areas with high concentrations of isotope 247, the waste product from our early nuclear tests. Rebecca's eyes lit up. The stuff we've been trying to clean up for decades. Yes, ma'am. It's like kryptonite to their shielding technology. They don't even realize it because they've never encountered it before. It's unique to Earth's nuclear programs. The room erupted in focused activity. Rebecca turned to General Thompson. Sir, request permission to implement Operation Thundershield. Thompson nodded grimly. Do it. Within hours, military bases worldwide began moving their nuclear waste into strategic positions. The Kraxan, monitoring these movements, interpreted them as desperate relocations of weapons they already knew how to counter. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, an unprecedented session was taking place. For the first time in human history, every nation had a single common enemy. The Chinese president stood first. China stands with humanity. The United States stands with humanity. Russia stands with humanity. One by one, every nation declared their unity. Centuries-old conflicts were set aside in the face of extinction. Rebecca coordinated with international forces, setting up a global defense network. They'll expect us to use our nuclear arsenal, she briefed her teams. Instead, we're going to use something they've never seen before. Good old-fashioned human stubbornness. As the 24-hour deadline approached, Michael's team made another discovery. The isotope doesn't just disrupt their shields, he reported. It makes them visible. We can see their entire fleet. Rebecca smiled for the first time in days. How many? 500 ships, ma'am. They thought they were being conservative. After all, why send a large fleet to subdue a pre-FTL civilization? The response to the Kraxan ultimatum was broadcast globally. President Sarah Mitchell stood before the world, her voice steady. To the Kraxan Empire, humanity has a message for you. We will not surrender. We will not submit. If you want Earth, come and take it. In orbit, the Kraxan Fleet Commander, Supreme Executor Tarkavian, received the message with disbelief. In 10,000 years of conquest, no pre-FTL civilization had ever refused their initial demand. Launch the first wave, he ordered. Show them the price of defiance. But as the first Kraxan ships entered the atmosphere, their shields began to fail. The strategic placement of isotope 247 created a web of vulnerability that the humans had mapped out with perfect precision. Rebecca watched from command as the first shots were fired. Conventional weapons, enhanced with trace amounts of the isotope, tore through the previously impenetrable Kraxan ships. Send the message, she ordered. Across all frequencies, in every language the Kraxan had used, Earth responded. First lesson in human history: we don't take kindly to threats. As the burning remains of 3 Kraxan ships fell from the sky, Supreme Executor XR Kavian realized his empire had made a critical mistake. They had expected submission from a species that had spent its entire history fighting against overwhelming odds. The war for Earth had begun, and humanity had just landed the first punch. Marine Captain David Reynolds crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a Kraxan scout ship in the Mojave Desert, the scorching sun beating down on his tactical gear. His team had been tracking this particular vessel for hours after its erratic descent through the atmosphere. "Status report," he whispered into his comm unit. "Sir, no life signs detected inside," Sergeant Mills responded. "But there's significant energy readings from what appears to be their engine core." Dr. Thomas Parker, the eccentric quantum physicist they'd brought along, was practically bouncing with excitement despite the 110-degree heat. "Captain, their propulsion system is still intact. Do you have any idea what we could learn from?" "Doc, we're not here for a science experiment," David cut him off. "This is a military operation to secure potential weapons technology." But as they approached the downed ship, something unexpected happened. The vessel's defensive systems suddenly activated, its automated turrets swiveling to track them. Yet, the weapons didn't fire. "Hold position," David ordered, but Dr. Parker was already walking forward, his head tilted in curiosity. "Fascinating," the physicist muttered, consulting his handheld scanner. "The targeting system is active, but it's confused." David was about to order Parker back when he noticed it too. The turrets were moving erratically, unable to lock onto any of them despite their clear line of sight. "It's our brainwaves," Parker announced triumphantly. "The Kraxan targeting systems are designed to predict movement patterns using advanced AI, but human consciousness operates on frequencies that create interference patterns in their neural networks." Reynolds processed this information quickly. "You're saying their weapons can't target us because they can't predict what we're going to do?" "Exactly. Their technology is so advanced that it's actually a weakness. They rely too heavily on predictive AI, but human decision-making is too chaotic for their systems to process effectively." The discovery was revolutionary. Within hours, teams of scientists and military personnel swarmed the site. Dr. Parker led the research effort to develop what he called Mind Chaff, a system that would amplify human brainwave patterns to create large-scale targeting disruption fields. Meanwhile, David's team continued to explore the ship. In the command center, they found something even more valuable: the Kraxan's tactical database. "They've never lost a war," David read from the translated text, "because they've never fought anyone who thinks like us." The Kraxan's military doctrine was built on perfect prediction and flawless execution. They had no concept of improvisation, no understanding of the controlled chaos that humans called combat tactics. Back at the Pentagon, Colonel Hayes received their report with growing optimism. "So their greatest strength is actually their greatest weakness," she mused. "They've evolved beyond unpredictability, beyond innovation in the heat of battle." Dr. Parker's team worked around the clock, developing portable mind chaff generators. The first field tests exceeded all expectations. Kraxan weapons couldn't track any human wearing the devices, their targeting systems thrown into confusion by the amplified chaos of human thought patterns. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young private who'd been a professional gamer before enlisting noticed something about the Kraxan ship's interface. "It's like they never developed past point and click," he explained to David. "Their entire combat system is based on perfect information and predictable responses. They don't know how to handle random button mashing." This insight led to a complete overhaul of Earth's defense strategy. Instead of trying to match the Kraxan's precision, Human forces embraced chaos. Fighter pilots were encouraged to trust their instincts, to make split-second decisions that no AI could predict. The Kraxan Empire had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules of engagement, that chose to dance in the chaos rather than impose order. As David watched the first squadron of mine-chaff-equipped fighters take off, he turned to Dr. Parker. "You know what makes this really ironic, Doc? They probably think we're the primitive ones." Parker smiled, adjusting his ever-present safety goggles. "Sometimes, Captain, being primitive is exactly what you need to be." The Kraxan forgot something important in their quest for perfection. Sometimes the best innovations come from embracing imperfection. In orbit, the Kraxan fleet was about to learn this lesson the hard way. Humanity was ready to show them why unpredictability was not a flaw, but a feature. Kelly Anderson never expected her NASCR experience would help save the world. Yet here she was, teaching Earth's best pilots how to outmaneuver alien warships using techniques she'd developed on the speedways of Daytona. "The key is controlled chaos," she explained to her latest class of space combat trainees. "The Kraxan expect us to follow standard space combat protocols, so we're going to do everything they think is impossible." In the simulator behind her, a holographic display showed the maneuver she perfected, the Anderson spiral. It looked less like a military tactic and more like a controlled crash, using solar radiation and debris fields as cover while executing turns that would kill any pilot who didn't have NASCR-level G-force training. "Ma'am," a young pilot raised his hand. "Won't their targeting systems adjust to our patterns eventually?" Kelly smiled. "That's the beauty of it. There is no pattern. Every pilot does it differently. We're not teaching you a specific maneuver. We're teaching you how to think like a racing driver in space." Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt, Jack Murphy was making his own breakthrough. The former demolitions expert had been testing various mining explosives on captured Kraxan hull materials when he made an accidental discovery. "It's the commercial stuff," he reported excitedly to command. "The basic mining charges we use in asteroid operations. They create a resonance frequency that shatters their hull material like glass." Colonel Hayes immediately saw the potential. "How fast can we convert our mining fleet?" The answer was, very fast. Within days, civilian mining ships were being transformed into guerrilla warfare vessels. Their small size and primitive construction made them nearly invisible to Kraxan sensors, which were calibrated to detect advanced energy signatures. The first major test of these new tactics came during the Battle of the Jupiter Line. Kelly led a squadron of converted mining ships, their holds filled with Murphy's special charges, against a Kraxan battle group. "Remember," she broadcasted to her team, "they're looking for military vessels. We're just a bunch of lost miners who took a wrong turn at Mars." The Kraxan ships detected the approaching mining fleet, but dismissed them as refugees. By the time they realized their mistake, Kelly's squadron was already executing their attack run. "Now," she called out, "show them some good old Earth hospitality." The mining ships split apart in what appeared to be random directions, each pilot following their own variation of the Anderson spiral. The Kraxan ships, their AI targeting systems overwhelmed by the unpredictable flight patterns, could only watch as the primitive vessels dropped their payload of mining charges. The results were spectacular. The resonance weapons tore through the advanced alien hull material, creating chain reactions that ripped apart 3 Kraxan cruisers before they could even return fire. Back on Earth, Jack Murphy watched the battle telemetry with growing pride. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best," he commented to his team. They spent millennia developing energy shields against energy weapons, never thinking someone would just throw rocks at them really hard. The success of the Jupiter Line battle changed the nature of the war. Earth forces began operating in small, independent groups, using converted civilian vessels and outdated technology in ways the Kraxen had never anticipated. Kelly's training program expanded, teaching pilots from every nation how to fight like street racers in space. The Anderson spiral became legendary, with each pilot adding their own personal touch to the maneuver. "We're not just fighting a war," Kelly told her students. "We're teaching the galaxy that sometimes the best technology is no technology at all. Sometimes victory comes from the skills you build when all you have is your wit and your will to survive." As reports of Earth's successes spread, the Kraxen High Command faced an uncomfortable reality. Their superior technology was being consistently outmaneuvered by what they had dismissed as primitive tactics. In the depths of space, another mining fleet approached a Kraxen patrol. At their head, Kelly Anderson smiled as she prepared to show these aliens another impossible maneuver. "All right, people," she broadcast to her squadron. "Let's show them why you should never underestimate a species that invented stock car racing." Robert Wilson never imagined his high school history lectures would become Galactic Rebellion manifestos. Yet here he was, broadcasting from a hidden studio deep under the Rocky Mountains, teaching the galaxy about Earth's greatest resistance movements. Today's lesson, he spoke into the quantum-enhanced transmitter, is about the French resistance during World War I. How a small group of determined people stood against an empire that seemed unbeatable. His broadcasts, initially meant just for human resistance cells, had found an unexpected audience. Billions of beings across Kraxen-controlled space were tuning in, using modified gaming consoles engineered by Earth's teenagers to bypass Imperial communication blocks. "The key to resistance," Robert continued, "isn't about having the biggest weapons. It's about having the biggest hearts, the strongest will, and most importantly, the best songs." He played Le Chant des Partisans, the French resistance anthem, followed by Bob Marley's Get Up, Stand Up. Across the galaxy, alien species who had never heard human music before felt something stir in their hearts. In the Kraxen-controlled worlds of the Centauri system, a species called the Volari heard Robert's broadcasts and began humming Earth songs in their factories. The Kraxen overseers couldn't understand why production had dropped by 30%, or why their workers were suddenly walking with a new rhythm in their steps. "Music is universal," Robert explained in his broadcast. "It speaks to something deep inside all living beings, the yearning to be free." Meanwhile, Earth's teenagers had become the unexpected heroes of this cultural revolution. 16-year-old Jenny Martinez from Texas figured out how to turn outdated gaming consoles into long-range communication devices. Her video tutorial, disguised as a gaming walkthrough, spread across the galaxy. "It's actually pretty simple," she explained in her viral video. "These old consoles use quantum entanglement for multiplayer mode. The Kraxen never bothered to block them, because they thought they were just toys. The Empire's attempts to jam these transmissions failed spectacularly. Every time they blocked one frequency, Earth's teenagers found 3 more. They turned it into a game, competing to see who could create the most creative workaround." Robert's history lessons became the framework for a galactic underground network. He taught about the American Revolution, the Indian independence movement, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. Each story resonated with different alien species, showing them that resistance was not only possible, but had succeeded many times throughout human history. "Remember," he would say, "every empire in human history that claimed to be invincible has fallen. The Kraxen are no different." The impact was profound. On the planet Nexus Prime, the arthropodian species began their own version of the Salt March. On Rigel Beta, the silicon-based crystallines performed their version of Earth rock music using resonating frequencies that disrupted Kraxen communication systems. The Kraxen High Command was baffled. Their reports showed no major military activities, yet their control was slipping. They couldn't understand how a pre-FTL civilization's cultural exports were causing more damage than any weapon. "Sir," a young human resistance fighter approached Robert after one broadcast. "The Kraxen are saying we're using some kind of mind control technology." Robert laughed. "We are. It's called hope. And unlike their technology, it gets stronger the more you share it." As the revolution spread, Earth music became its heartbeat. The Beatles' Revolution played in underground clubs on 100 worlds. Queen's "We Will Rock You" became a universal anthem of defiance, its simple beat easy for any species to reproduce. In his hidden studio, Robert prepared for another broadcast. Today's lesson was about the power of peaceful resistance, inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. But before he began, he played a simple song that had become the galaxy's favorite, "Imagine" by John Lennon. As the music played, billions of beings across the galaxy stopped what they were doing and listened. The revolution wasn't just about freedom from the Kraxen anymore. It was about something bigger. The dream of a galaxy where all species could live together in peace. And it had started with a history teacher who believed that the most powerful weapon in the universe was a story well told. Space Force Commander Elizabeth Turner stood in the Lunar Command Center, watching the massive Kraxen warship approach Earth's moon. The vessel was unlike anything they'd seen before, a planet killer designed to shatter entire worlds. "They're getting desperate," she remarked to Steve Patterson, the retired video game developer who'd become her most valuable tactical advisor. Bringing out their ultimate weapon this early wasn't in their standard playbook. Steve nodded, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. "They think destroying the moon will break our spirit." Classic boss battle move. When you can't beat the player, threaten something they care about. The Lunar Command Center buzzed with activity as Operation Trojan Horse entered its final phase. For months, they'd maintained the facade of civilian mining operations on the dark side of the moon, all while implementing Steve's master plan, a plan he'd originally designed for his best-selling space strategy game. Confirmation from all stations, Lieutenant Sarah Cooper reported. "EMP generators are charged and ready. We've evacuated all non-essential personnel." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "The Kraxen still think we're trying to protect our mining operations." "Yes, Mom. Their intel suggests we're desperately trying to save our mineral extraction facilities. They have no idea about the trap." Steve's design was brilliant in its simplicity. The entire dark side of the moon had been converted into a massive electromagnetic pulse weapon, disguised as a network of mining installations. The Kraxen's own scans had confirmed their deception. They saw exactly what they expected to see, a primitive civilization's attempts at resource extraction. "Their planet killer is entering optimal firing range," Sarah announced. "They're broadcasting their ultimatum." The Kraxen message boomed through the command center. "Witness the price of continued defiance. Your moon's destruction will serve as an example to all who resist the Empire." Elizabeth smiled grimly. "Send our response." Sarah transmitted the message they'd prepared. "Please don't destroy our precious mining operations. We surrender unconditionally." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Kraxen planet killer moved into position, its main weapon powering up. Energy readings went off the charts as it prepared to demonstrate its overwhelming power. "They took the bait," Steve whispered, "just like in level 47 of Stellar Conquest." Elizabeth raised her hand. "All stations, initiate Operation Trojan Horse on my mark." She paused, watching the enemy vessel reach the perfect position. 3, 2, 1, mark. The dark side of the moon erupted with electromagnetic energy. Thousands of EMP generators, hidden in what appeared to be mining shafts, activated simultaneously. The pulse was beyond anything Earth had ever generated, a massive wave of energy that engulfed the Kraxen fleet. The effect was instantaneous. The planet killer, along with its escort fleet, went dark. Their sophisticated systems, so dependent on advanced technology, were completely paralyzed. Direct hit, Sarah called out. 37 Kraxan vessels disabled. The planet killer is, sir, it's falling into lunar orbit. Steve couldn't contain his excitement. Just like the simulations. Their shields are down, their engines are dead, and their backup systems can't handle the energy overflow. Elizabeth was already issuing orders. Launch our modified shuttles. Let's show them what Earth's primitive salvage teams can do. Within hours, Earth forces had boarded and captured the disabled Kraxan vessels. The feared planet killer, pride of the Imperial fleet, was secured by a team of space mechanics using tools the Kraxan considered obsolete. In the aftermath, Elizabeth and Steve stood in the observation dome, watching Earth forces tow their prizes back to orbit. You know what's really ironic? Steve mused. I based that trap on an ancient Earth strategy. The Trojan horse. The Kraxan had all this advanced technology, but they never learned the basic lesson. Sometimes the simplest tricks are the most effective. Elizabeth nodded. They thought destroying the moon would break us. Instead, we turned it into the biggest booby trap in human history. As they watched, the first rays of sunlight crept over the lunar surface, illuminating the now exposed EMP generators. They'd sacrificed their lunar bases, but they'd gained something far more valuable. Proof that humanity could outsmart the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Send word to command, Elizabeth ordered. Tell them it's time for Phase 2. The Kraxan just learned we can take their biggest guns. Now let's show them what we can do with them. The war had reached a turning point, and the galaxy was about to learn why you should never corner a species that had spent its entire history figuring out how to overcome impossible odds. Marine Sergeant Nathan Miller crouched behind a Martian ridge, watching a Kraxan patrol through his tactical visor. His team had been conducting hit-and-run operations on Mars for weeks, using strategies that would have made his old football coach proud. Blue 42, Blue 42, he whispered into his comm, using their new football-based combat language. His squad immediately understood. They were about to execute a classic quarterback sneak, adapted for space combat. The Kraxan never saw it coming. While their attention was fixed on the obvious threat in front of them, Miller's team had already flanked their position using underground mining tunnels. The defensive line was completely broken. Touchdown. Miller's second-in-command whooped as they captured the patrol's command vehicle intact. But what they found inside would change the course of the war. A group of alien refugees, members of a species called the Orcs, had been hiding in the vehicle. Unlike the tall, crystalline Kraxan, the Orcs were small, multi-limbed beings known throughout the galaxy for their engineering prowess. We watched your battles. The Gid's leader, Zixtal, explained through a translator. Your species fights like none we've ever seen. You turn chaos into strategy. Miller shrugged. We just use what works. Sometimes that's a football play. Sometimes it's a basketball fast break in space. The Orcs were fascinated. For millennia, they'd been forced to build weapons for the Kraxan, their mathematical precision serving the Empire's need for perfect order. But here was a species that embraced imperfection, that turned sports strategies into military victories. We want to help, Zixtal declared. We can enhance your technology, but we want to learn your ways of combat in return. Word spread quickly. Soon, representatives from other subjugated species began seeking out Earth forces. The Erethi, masters of light-bending technology. The Valerians, experts in quantum communications. Each brought their own technologies and skills, each eager to learn humanity's unique approach to warfare. At the Mars training facility, Miller found himself teaching alien species how to run a zone defense in space combat. The sight of a 7-limbed Gix successfully executing a pick-and-roll maneuver against a Kraxan patrol would have been comical if it hadn't been so effective. The beauty of sports strategies, Miller explained to his interstellar students, is that they're built on universal principles: position, timing, misdirection. These work whether you're on a football field or in an asteroid belt. The Alliance grew stronger each day. The Giths modified Earth's primitive weapons with their advanced engineering, creating hybrid technologies that the Kraxen's predictive systems couldn't counter. The Arathi taught humans how to bend light around their ships, while Earth taught them how to use that ability to run the perfect fake-out play. During the Battle of Olympus Mons, the first true test of this combined force, Miller led a mixed team of humans and aliens in what he called the Hail Mary operation. Using modified mining ships, cloaking technology, and good old-fashioned football strategy, they managed to capture an entire Kraxen battle fleet. Miller told his alien comrades as they celebrated the victory. Sometimes the best plan is no plan at all. The Kraxen Empire found itself facing something unprecedented, a multi-species rebellion that didn't follow any logical pattern. Their perfect order was being undone by strategies borrowed from human sports, led by a species that had only recently mastered spaceflight. Back on Earth, Colonel Hayes received Miller's report with growing satisfaction. They've spent thousands of years perfecting their military doctrine, she told her staff, but they never learned to play games. As more species joined the Alliance, each bringing their own technologies and learning Earth's unconventional tactics, the balance of power began to shift. The galaxy was learning that true strength didn't come from perfect order or advanced technology, but from the ability to adapt, to improvise, and most importantly, to play as a team. Miller watched as a group of Giz engineers excitedly discussed the concept of a fast break with some Arathi lightbenders. In that moment, he realized they weren't just fighting a war anymore. They were teaching the galaxy how to play, how to create, and how to be free. President Laura Mitchell stood before the newly formed Galactic Coalition, her voice carrying across a chamber filled with representatives from 100 different species. The Great Hall of Unity, built from the remains of the Kraxen's last fortress on Earth, symbolized everything they had fought for. "We gather here not as conquerors," she began, "but as equals." The Kraxen Empire fell not because of superior weapons or advanced technology, but because they never understood the true source of power: unity in diversity. In the front row, Detective Mark Thompson, now chief of the Coalition's peacekeeping force, smiled at the irony. Before the invasion, he'd investigated alien abduction claims as a joke. Now he led a multi-species force dedicated to maintaining peace across the galaxy. The Kraxen's greatest mistake, Laura continued, was believing that progress only moved in one direction. They saw our movies, our music, our sports, and dismissed them as primitive entertainment. They never realized these were the things that made us strong. The Assembly Hall's holographic displays showed scenes from the war. Human football tactics being used to outmaneuver Kraxen fleets, Earth teenagers teaching alien resistance fighters how to use gaming consoles as communication devices, Robert Wilson's history lessons inspiring revolutions across the stars. But our victory came at a price. The president acknowledged, her voice solemn. We lost many brave souls, human and alien alike, who believed in a future where all species could live free. Mark thought about the changes he'd seen. Earth had become a nexus of galactic culture, where ancient alien technologies merged with human creativity. In New York, Gitz engineers worked alongside human scientists to develop new forms of clean energy. In Tokyo, Arathi light artists collaborated with human musicians to create entertainment that transcended species boundaries. The question before us now, Laura continued, is not whether we can defeat another empire, but whether we can build something better in its place. The Kraxen believed in perfect order. We believe in perfect freedom. The freedom to be different, to disagree, to dance to our own rhythms while still moving forward together. The Coalition Charter was more than just a political document. It enshrined principles that the Kraxan had never understood: democracy, individual rights, cultural preservation, and the fundamental truth that progress could take many forms. In the years that followed, Earth became known not as the planet that defeated an empire, but as the world that taught the galaxy how to be free. The Anderson spiral became a standard maneuver in spaceflight schools. Robert Wilson's history lessons were required study for diplomats of all species. Even Kraxan refugees, freed from generations of rigid control, found a new home among the stars. Mark's peacekeeping forces embodied this new philosophy. They didn't impose order, they protected choice. They didn't demand uniformity. They celebrated difference, and when conflicts arose, they resolved them not through superior force, but through understanding and respect. Our legacy, President Mitchell concluded, is not the weapons we built or the battles we won. It's the truth we proved, that the strongest force in the universe is not technology or military might or even perfect order. It's the power of free beings choosing to stand together. As the assembly erupted in applause, each species expressing joy in their own unique way, Mark caught sight of a young Kraxan child playing with a human girl in the gallery. They were trading cards from some new hybrid game that had sprung up in the post-war era, their laughter bridging the gap between species that had once seemed unbridgeable. In that moment, he understood what they had really won. Not just a war, but a future where the next generation would grow up known not as humans or aliens, but as children of the stars, free to choose their own path among the endless possibilities of space. The Kraxan had come to Earth expecting to find a primitive world ripe for conquest. Instead, they found the one thing their perfect empire could never defeat: a species that had already mastered the art of being gloriously, beautifully imperfect. And in that imperfection, humanity had given the galaxy its greatest gift: the courage to be free.